Dear poor people, if you want to make Glenn Loury look good, sit him next to John McWhorter. So apparently, since the conviction of Donald Trump on 34 counts of, I don't know what, but 34 counts of something that is a felony in New York, Glenn Loury and John McWhorter are back to their podcast and they are discussing it. And I will tell you, I don't care how badly you feel about Glenn Loury. As you know, I recently did a video on Glenn Loury and how depressed I am with the thinking, the quality of the thinking, today's public intellectuals, and that, you know, what they're offering the country right now is to be loathed. However, Glenn Loury comes out as a shining star in this video. As soon as you sit him next to John McWhorter, oh, how he excels, how he shines. Take a look.
The country was run by this hideous person that you speak of, this dangerous person, for 4 years, and the ship didn't crash and sink. We did okay. John, you must be celebrating over there. Donald J. Trump has been convicted of 34 counts of felonious behavior in a New York City courtroom by a jury of his peers. He's now a felon, a convicted felon awaiting sentencing. Have you broken out the champagne?
No, because it won't make enough of a difference. It makes him a hero to his fans. And there are a certain number of people who apparently feel that if he, if an appeal can't happen or if an appeal doesn't work, which it won't, then they can't imagine pulling the lever for a convicted felon. But it's not.
Oh, you're quite so sure that you're sure he's going to lose Trump on appeal?
I read that an appeal would be highly unlikely to go through just on the formal grounds. There's just nothing to appeal. And so if there isn't, how many people would that turn? And from what I can see, not enough to change the situation that we're in. I only got a tiny bit of gratification because my sense of popping out the champagne would be less about whether it would make a difference with the election, but if it brought him down a little bit. And that's kind of puerile, but I didn't really get that either because, frankly, he'll just see it as injustice and persecution against him. He did seem to be shocked at first, and I can barely square that with my sense of him. It seems like it actually hurt him that this jury, and he knows it's a jury from New York City, which doesn't like him, that this jury actually did convict him and so completely, but only for a second. And then he was back to his old. So do you find it momentous news? I found it dramatic. I followed the trial closely. I found it interesting, but
well, I find it momentous, but not in the same spirit of that you just voiced. I find it momentous in that it exemplifies a turn in American political and legal culture that I think is ominous. It is a clearly politically motivated abuse or opportunistic exploitation of the legal framework in order to accomplish their political goal, which is preventing this guy from being elected president of the United States. And
okay, now look at this. When he says that he finds it to be an abuse of the political and judicial culture in the United States, look at John McWhorter's face. I mean, just hold on. I'm going to see if I can pull this up. I want you to see. Look at his face. He looks constipated. He looks absolutely constipated, like the thought of the fact that somebody doesn't see this, and he says that he could barely celebrate any of this because he wanted mostly for Donald Trump to be taken down a peg. Now, let me start by saying this. This is not a Donald Trump video. This is not an endorsement of Donald Trump. This is a look at, an observation, and even possibly a critique of elites, of public intellectuals. So you have these two professors from the academy, and they are what they should be, discussing the prominent issues of the day. And in this case, it would be the Trump trial and conviction. One, Glenn Loury has the position that he thinks that it is a departure from our tradition, political and judicial tradition. John McWhorter is going to tell you a little bit more about what he thinks about it, but I find it fascinating that he said he couldn't get any relief because what he wanted was for at least the trial to take Trump down a peg. I think that this really, at its face, at the bottom of this, and this is horrible, horrible. No wonder he says it's puerile. This is horrible that what they want is to hurt him. And the fact that he does not appear to be hurt is, in fact, what's driving them. And to be a grown man in a professional position of prominence, and to be a public intellectual of great prestige, to be sitting around on a podcast saying that you want this man to be hurt makes you look like a child. And I think that's maybe the explanation for that constipated face. And by God, certainly that constipated thinking. Mr. McWhorter, it seems as though you need to go someplace and get some relief. Do not walk around with your face like that. And if you can do anything about your thinking, please do so. But this is a terrible thing to wish, even if you think Donald Trump is wrong, even if you think that the jury found right, you should say, well, then justice is served, and that should relieve you. But he can't feel relieved. Even though he believes justice is served, he can't feel relieved because he doesn't think Donald Trump has been hurt enough. That is an awful, awful, awful way to proceed life. And I'll tell you, if I had a child in his class, I sure would pull him out. I want my child nowhere around somebody like that. That is, ooh, that is, and it smacks of jealousy, just pure Cain and Abel, all out baseline definition of jealousy. It smacks of that. And I think this is very sad for a grown man to be walking around with his face twisted up and his thinking muffled because another human being, a fellow American, isn't hurt enough. And what that tells me is the elites for whom position that he represents, these elites are not going to stop because that's what they want. He said the quiet part out loud. People can always say, oh, they said the quiet. No, he said the quiet part out loud, which is they want him hurt. They want to see him somewhere on his knees and hurt. And I don't think if given the chance, they will stop until they see that. Let's continue.
I think that's debasing the currency. It's poisoning the well. It's injurious to the culture of political competition in the country. And this is not the last we're going to hear of it. Not just in this election cycle, a precedent has been established. And, I have a bad feeling about a foreboding about what that entails. Plus, as you say, I think the net effect, he's wasted scores of millions of dollars in the aftermath of the conviction. Not a single person who was going to vote for Trump before that, or very few who would have voted for Trump before are going to be persuaded by the label felon. The anchors at the networks are telling their Republicans who come on, can you still support him now that he's a convicted felon? To which the answer is, of course I can, because I think the conviction was bullshit. If he had done 34 assaults or carjackings or embezzlements or whatever, that would be one thing. But this is bullshit, is what they're going to say to themselves, rightly, in my humble opinion. So this is not the last we would have heard of this kind of thing, and lawfare is not a healthy development, in my opinion.
Glenn, I know what you mean, and I had a feeling you would feel that way about it.
Yeah,
and I know what you mean about the precedent. That we can't just think about this now. What's the new pattern going to be? But to be honest, and I think you'll find this familiar, I think Trump is such a unique phenomenon that a little bit of vigilante justice or bending the proprieties, I understand it because he's truly a hideous, monstrous prospect as somebody who should be running this country for a second time, and presumably thinking of himself as not being responsible for being reelected again, although he's made his noises about trying for a third term. This is
what's so monstrous about him, John? He was president for 4 years. We survived. Where's the monstrosity?
We survived.
I'm not sure I get it.
Well, I think everybody knows what I was going to say. Bragg, I agree that this is politically motivated. It's clear. There's so many other people who have done things like what Trump did in this case, where nobody bats an eye, you wouldn't have a case. Yeah, it's clear that Bragg wanted to get him. And when Bragg gives an interview about it in 30 years with white hair, some interviewer is going to say, most people say it was politically motivated. Was it? And how do you feel? And he's going to say, of course it was. And I think I did the right thing. And I'm going to agree with him. What was so monstrous about Trump? I mean, need we even pretend? He's an immoral person with no respect for or interest in other people, and often an outright scorn for other people explicitly expressed, which he tries to reflect in actual policies. He was reined in somewhat, but the fact that all these things were even floated, his behavior with overseas leaders, his cult-like devotion, not only to Putin, but the idea that he and Jong-un fell in love, etc., where it's all about his narcissism, even when it's about international geopolitics, is pathetic, it's embarrassing, and it's dangerous. And just in general, to have a president who's incapable of paying attention to detail or policy, where everything is really just all about him, and to an extent beyond that of any president I can think of in history. All of them, of course, have to be about themselves, but Trump is a gorilla. I think to have the country run by somebody who can't pay attention and surrounds himself with sycophants, it's not a good situation.
The country was run by this hideous person that you speak of, this dangerous person, for 4 years. And the ship didn't crash and sink. We did okay, frankly. I mean, the pandemic came along. I don't think you're going to blame that on Trump. Are you? I thought the economy was doing kind of okay. The world didn't suddenly become on fire with war all over the place because Trump was president. I mean, sure, of course you can criticize him about his policies, but I don't see this hideousness. I see a guy who's hit a note in American politics in this first part of the 21st century. And, it's politics as usual. And I don't see anything exceptional about Donald J. Trump, exceptionally evil. I mean, compared to Hillary Rodham Clinton, compared to Joseph Robinette Biden, these are politicians. They have pluses, they have minuses, they have fans, they have detractors, they have flaws. They're evil? Is Trump evil? You think he's evil? Do you think he's a racist? You had a column recently about suppose he had said the N-word, in which I thought you even downplayed the instinct to latch on to, Trump malapropism as indicative of his moral turpitude or something like that. Did I read you incorrectly?
No, he's a casual bigot. I've never found that terribly interesting. Many people would be surprised at how little I've actually written about it. He's elderly and ignorant and of a certain time and place. I'm sure he's said the N-word quite often, but it's not surprising, and it's not the important point. However, evil, no. To be honest, that assigns to him an agency I don't think he has. He's mentally 5, but that really scares me. And also, Glenn, don't you think that, with him trying to subvert the election and not apologizing for it, and basically all but saying that if he doesn't win, it couldn't possibly be legitimate. Again, that's the reasoning of a 5-year-old. And you think that it's appropriate that somebody who incited that riot and won't apologize for it should get another term to run the country?
Now, I'm on the record saying that he should have stepped down after he exhausted his options in the courts after 2020, and that his willingness to look for extraordinary means in order to inhibit the due inauguration and installation of the winner of that election as president was deeply problematic, and you could even argue disqualifying. I said I was wrong about Trump after that because I think the lack of deference to the unwritten rules about how you conduct yourself in this office, which is a trust that each person who occupies the office is has bestowed upon them. And I think Trump abused that trust in his post-election behavior in 2020, early 2021. And yeah, I have a problem with that. I didn't say I was voting for him, you know, but I do notice that he's ahead in the polls in a lot of places. And I also noticed that Joseph Robinette Biden doesn't happen to be free from taint of the sort that people are quick to ascribe to Trump. And I'm just struck by this narrative that we're going to save democracy by preventing the people of the country from voting for somebody whom they want to vote for. That our best arguments are we can't have him elected again. Not we have a vision, not here's our program, not vote for this. It's vote against that. And, I find that not especially flattering to the other side who are opposing Trump. If he's that bad, it shouldn't be so hard to persuade the voters of North Carolina, of Florida, of Arizona, of Michigan, of Minnesota, of Wisconsin, of Pennsylvania, of Ohio. Shouldn't be that hard to persuade the voters. It is hard, and that makes me think, well, maybe it's that the other side is very weak and they're grasping for a narrative, not that this guy is as bad as people say he is.
He called him a gorilla. That is priceless. He called him a gorilla. All right, so two amazing things have happened. Number one, Trump became a gorilla in this conversation, and Glenn Loury was the voice of common sense. This makes me think that the founding fathers were absolute geniuses because the one thing they could not stand was elites. They wrote a constitution and they designed a government organization whereby the common everyday man would be vested with the sovereignty to make the decisions. And we can see now why that was such a good idea. Can you imagine if they had organized the government so people of the likes of John McWhorter would be the ones with their constipation and never being able to relieve themselves in charge? Oh, heaven. Thank God that is not the case. They had an understanding that normal, everyday, average people had enough sense to know how to govern themselves. If they governed themselves under the rule of, I'll take care of myself and mind my business, and you take care of yourself and mind your business. And we will use the government as almost an administrative function for when we have to deal with each other to set sort of the rules and the process and to umpire the occasion on when we have to interact. That was the way they saw this government, this playing out. And for whatever its faults may be, and I don't think there are many, but whatever its faults may be, it is certainly better than what has happened throughout history, the landscape of history, which is that the John McWhorters of the world, the people who whispered in the king's ear, or whispered to the potentate, or whispered to whoever was in charge on how, in fact, the people should be dealt with and managed and controlled and corralled and moved and assigned, that those people have been relegated to a place on the sidelines because every person shares the right to have agency in their own life. And that agency will inform how it is they deal with each other and how it is they interact with their government, because they are, in fact, the owners, the stewards of the government. And I'm very thankful for that. It's just so very clear how smart and how thoughtful and how far looking into the future, into the reaches of the future, the founders were, because they certainly had studied all of the mishaps of history and said, we don't want to repeat this again here. And though we are not perfect, for sure, we are not and never will be. So that's your fantasy. Let it go, because that's not going to happen. Although we are not perfect, we are certainly not subjects. We are not plebes. We are not the subjects of these so-called enlightened elites who want to basically, from what I can see, if you have to control people in that way and think for them and do for them and administrate everything for them, at that point, then I don't know what you have in a government if you don't have socialism? I'm not, tell me what the name of that government is, please, because I don't know. I thought it was socialism, but I could be wrong. What is the name of that government where the elites control, the few elites control the many of the rest of us? What's the name of that? Because that'd be very interesting to know. Mr. McWhorter, you probably know. You seem to be so very inclined with all the machinations of that government. Then please tell us. Help us find out what that is. Well, fortunately, the founders put these people in their place and made them one. That's why you have one vote. That's it. That's all you got, just like me. That's all we have. And he put those people in their place because history is replete with these type of people trying to be the ones in charge and trying. And again, I'm going back to, I think this is just flat out, plain out, old school Cain and Abel biblical jealousy, that they don't feel that he has a right to that office because he has not embraced all of the enlightenment that they have spent their lives cloaking themselves in. So please remember to like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching this video and for visiting my channel. I cannot wait to see you on this channel again. Please remember to click the notification button so that you'll know the next time I drop a video. I cannot wait to see you again because guess what? This is election season. More is going to be happening. And I want to say again for the last time, and I'm really going to let you go at this point. This is not about Donald Trump. The great thing about Donald Trump is Donald Trump, in fact, is a canvas. And he is an opportunity to discuss a whole lot of things for which may have been masked in the past, like all of this elitism that we now see that has been uncloaked and is now standing naked before us in the light of a high noon of day. This is what he has done. And these people are suffering in that light, in their nakedness, which my Bible tells me is exactly what happens when you are out here sinning. So again, thank you. Can't wait to see you again. Bye-bye.